started making these videos, the most frequent question that I got was about all the gear that I have behind me. That never really was my intention. It's really just the only angle from which I can film in my mini studio. But since you're curious about my setup, I thought it might be a nice idea to make a video on Shakuhachi and how to use the modular synthesizer that I have right behind me. Obviously, that's an endless topic. There's an endless number of effects that you can use, and there is also an almost limitless number of ways in which you can use these effects. So I'll start by saying that there are certain things that are easy to do with the Shakuhachi sound, and there are some things that are really difficult. As a rule of thumb, you can say the more the sound of the Shakuhachi is modified, the easier it is to produce just a mess. The problem, if you will, is that the Shakuhachi already has a very rich sound. It has very many overtones, it has a very complex sonic structure. On the other hand, if you don't modify the sound itself, but you use time-based effects like delay or reverb, for example, then it's quite easy to get a very nice result. And also it can get really cheesy really quickly. Speaking very generally, there are two main categories in which you can modify the sound of the Shakuhachi. One is the so-called in the box, the other is out of the box. In the box just means you use your computer. Out of the box means you use something else, for example, a synthesizer setup like that, or you can use guitar pedals or rack effects. I'm going to use my synthesizer that I have behind me here, and we'll see what we can do with that. And then maybe in a future video I'll dive into what you can do with other types of effects or what you can do in the box. But enough talking, let's move over to the thing and see what you can do. So this is the synthesizer. As you can see, there are lots of cables plugged in already. We don't need this for the demonstration. These are for a patch that I'm currently working on. I'm just going to quickly play a bit for you so you get an idea. That's a very relaxing song, right? Okay, so now that that's out of the way, let me move the camera up a bit higher so we can see the mic. So here's the plan. I'm going to show you quite a simple patch, just a delay, and we can add an overdrive as well, so you get an idea of what happens when you actually change the tone of the Shakuhachi and not just use a time-based effect. And the second is a bit more complex. It's really just one module that I'm using. It's the Mutable Instruments Rings, which is always a very nice module to use. But I'll be using some foot switches, which is really helpful if you have your hands full playing the flute. So I thought that might be useful to do as well. Okay, as with all these things, we have to follow the sound from the source to the destination. So the destination is the speaker, which I'm pointing to, which you cannot see, which is behind me. Okay, so we need to follow everything from the source to the speaker. Obviously, the sound starts here on the Shakuhachi, so we need a microphone, which I have here. I'll just place a pop filter in front of it. It's always good practice, in particular if you get a bit closer to the mic. Then the cable here goes into this module here, which converts the input from the microphone into a level that the modular synthesizer can work with. In general, you always have to amplify a signal from a microphone in some way, regardless of what you're doing, and bring it up to a level that the system that's behind it can work with. In this case, this is quite easy because I'm using a dynamic microphone, so we don't need to worry about anything like phantom power and mic preamps and all that stuff. And if you don't know what that is, don't worry about it for now. So the good thing is we can use this mic and go directly into this module here, which converts the mic level to a level that the synth can work with. Generally speaking, for modular synthesizers, you need a stronger signal. Eurorack, the version that I'm using here, is working between 5 volts, minus 5 volts, and plus 5 volts, or sometimes minus 10 to plus 10. Line levels, which you use for most of the other studio equipment and which you're using for your hi-fi system as well, this only has a range of about minus 1.7 volts to 1.7 volts. So the range is much smaller. So you always have to adapt the level. And this is what this module does here. It's really an envelope follower, but I'm using it here for getting the audio signal to a level that the synthesizer can work with. Okay, and then I'm taking this cable here and I'm plugging it into the delay input here. So the delay, as you can see on this drawing here, is the last module before we get into the output. So I'm really only using, from this whole thing here, I'm only using the very last module. And then from the output, we go into this module here. And this basically goes into the computer directly, and from the computers to the speakers. But you can also just attach speakers directly at that point. There is one more problem when you're using an acoustic instrument and you use effects. And that is that the sound, in particular of the Shakuhachi, is quite loud. The sound source is very close to our ears. So if I just hear the sound effect via the speakers, it's sometimes very difficult to hear the actual affected sound. So it's also always a good idea to wear headphones, and in particular use closed headphones. So I'm going to use these here. Okay, so if I tap the mic, you can hear the delay. Okay, so if I play the flute, you hear this echo. Okay, and then I can use the different parameters here. I can add more of the echo. I can have more repeats. Yeah, so the echo goes on for longer. And I can have the echoes coming later. That's a very simple effect that you can do. So in particular, if you crank up the effect very much, this works very well with the Shakuhachi. You can start playing with the sound. As you can see, this is quite straightforward. So this is a time-based effect where the sound of the Shakuhachi itself is not modified, but instead we get some echoes and we can play off these echoes. Plus also, if you add reverb to a Shakuhachi or if you add delay to a Shakuhachi, the instrument itself sounds nicer as well. So now let's add the overdrive as well. So it's basically the overdrive going into the delay, and then we get to the output. For that, I need to change the input. We're not going into the delay in, but we're going into the OD in, which stands for overdrive in. Using the overdrive will really mangle the sound of the Shakuhachi. Okay, so we still have the delay, but you can also hear that it sounds more like an electric guitar than a shakuhachi if you really use this overdrive a lot. This is actually one of the few things that you can do with the shakuhachi tone to make it work even if you change the sound. So if you really overdo it and really destroy the signal, that works as well. What's more difficult are more subtle changes to the tone. Now let's use this module here. This is the Mutable Instruments Rings. This is not a rings tutorial. I just want to give you an idea of what this module does. As you can see, it says it is a resonator. What that means is that the module simulates vibrating structures, for example strings or membranes or tubes, and it reacts to an excitation signal. So if I give a trigger to this strum input here, we get this. And then we can change these parameters here. So for example, if I change the position parameter, it changes the position where the simulated structure is excited. And I can also choose between different types of structures. If I connect this to the module next to it and I give it a trigger input, so if I give it a trigger input here in the strum input as we had before, but I also give pitch information via this input here, we get something like this. And so on. And then finally, what we can do with this module is that we give it audio input. So for example, if I just give white noise in the input, we hear this. So this is where the Shakuhachi audio will come into the module. I've not even scratched the surface of what this module can do. As you can see, there are many more inputs, but I just wanted to give you a rough idea of what this module is that I'll be using in the following demonstration. Basically, as I already said, when we're playing Shakuhachi, we have our hands full. And if we want to change anything in the setup, if we want to change anything in the tone that we're producing, we basically only have the chance of using our feet. So I've connected two foot switches, these two here, and an expression pedal. These are usually used for an electric guitar, and this is usually used together with the keyboard. So these switches are connected with this cable, and this expression pedal is connected via this cable. So these two cables go into this module here. So this top one here is connected to the expression pedal, and then we have the outputs here, and the foot switch goes into this bottom one, and then we have the left switch and the right switch, each one going out here. So the two foot switches and the expression pedal go up here to this rings module. Basically what I did here is that I can control some of the parameters via the foot switches and the expression pedal. And then we still have one more output. This is also from the expression pedal, and this one goes here into this module, and this is a filter. I'm using it as a low pass filter here. Basically the output of the rings module, this cable here, goes into the low pass filter before the output of the low pass filter goes into the output that we had before. Brief summary: switches and expression pedal converted into modular signals. These go into the rings module, so I can control some parameters in the rings module. The output of the rings module goes to a low-pass filter, which is also controlled by the expression pedal, and the output of the low-pass filter then goes out to the audio output. So this may seem like a complicated setup, but the nice thing about this is that I can actually change the way the sound is manipulated while I'm playing. Because Rings is such a rich module, you can do so many things with it. So what I've done here is just take a few minutes and figure something out, and it's basically always something usable. The switches that I'm using, this left one, switch A, is just dampening the sound. So if I play, you hear the Rings module carrying on with the sounds that it produces. But if I press this A switch, I can dampen the sound. So it fades away really quickly. This is very useful in a live situation, in particular if you have some feedbacks going on, as I learned. So always have something where you can dampen the sound that's coming from the effects modules. The A is the dampener. Then the expression pedal here. This changes the tones. So the trick for something like the expression pedal, when you reach a new note on the Shakuhachi, you reach a new position on the foot pedal as well. And I have no idea what the module produces, but in most cases it's an interesting combination of the note that I land on and the new sound that the module produces. So in this way it's a sort of an interaction between the module and my playing. And then finally the B switch. So that does something rhythmic, so it doesn't really change the overall character of the sound, but it gives a momentary change in the sound. So these are just some ideas of what you can do to combine a modular synthesizer with the Shakuhachi, and where you use the modular synthesizer as an elaborate effects module. So the synthesizer itself doesn't really play its own music, it only just reacts to what the Shakuhachi is doing. Maybe you have experienced yourself with a setup like this or with a similar setup. Please let me know in the comments. I'm really curious to hear if you have any suggestions of what can be done in a setup like this. And maybe you have an idea for a future video. I'm just starting this channel, so I'm very open to suggestions. If you like this kind of video, please subscribe to my channel. Please like this video, and I hope to see you in one of my next videos. Bye! I think I got hooked again by what the module does, so I'll continue playing a bit with the settings that I have at the moment.